Welcome to Rex Factor!
This week, Edward the Exile. With your hosts, Graham Duke and Ali Hood.
Hello!
Hello.
And welcome to Rex Factor, reviewing all the nearly monarchs of England and the United Kingdom, from Ethelwald to Albert Victor, the people who could or should have become monarch, only for fate to intervene. Now, as you've heard this week, we are reviewing Edward the Exile, probably not a name that a lot of people are necessarily familiar with.
Edward.
It isn't, well, the Edward bit, absolutely.
Yeah, the Exile, have we even mentioned him before?
He will have been mentioned, but he won't have been the sort of star person in an episode before. He'll always be a little bit on the side. But as we'll see, he's actually quite a crucial part of the 1066 story.
Right.
Quite a fascinating life, even if one that is forgotten. So I think he's going to be an interesting one for us.
Okay.
If you want to find out more about us, go to our website, rexfactorpodcast.com, where you get links to all of our social media and further news. And if you want to listen to more of us, then you can sign up to patreon.com/rexfactor, join the Privy Council, and get access to an ad-free version of this podcast, over 450 bonus episodes, and our Discord channel. You got it now?
I was wondering if I had said it at the same time, Tom would be able to...
I'll just put it onto your list.
Yeah.
Plus, you can now watch the podcast on Spotify or YouTube, as long as we've been doing it right all day. Otherwise, we've got 4 wasted episodes.
Yeah.
So, let's find out. Edward the Exile, who he is.
Biography.
Edward the Exile is one of 2 sons of Edmund Ironside and Ealdgyth, born in 1016, which is a tumultuous year for English history. It sees his grandfather, Ethelred the Unready, die amidst an invasion by the Viking Canute. Mm-hmm. Then his own father, Edmund Ironside, fights an heroic resistance until the treachery of the turncoat Edric Striona sees Edmund defeated in battle and forced to partition the kingdom. And then a few weeks later, Edmund Ironside conveniently dies, and Canute becomes king of the whole country.
Well, at least he's brought it back together.
Yes.
Do you reckon how much admin had been done in those 6 months or whatever it was, like dividing up the country?
Oh, yeah.
And all that work's gone to waste. So it'd be
We've appointed chief executives of all these divisions in different bits of the kingdom. We'll have to merge them together.
There'd be letters in the paper that was like 3 million quid just on changing the stationery.
But yeah, a big year, 1016. A lot happening there. So what of Edward and his brother? Well, according to Geoffrey of Gaimar, writing a century later, the boys were removed from their mother, and to Canute they were brought directly. This did Edric, the traitor. Thus he thought to increase his honour. So they're taken away from their mother by Edric Striona, the treacherous Edric, and sent to Canute. And apparently Edric urges Canute to have the boys killed.
Wow.
Now, Canute certainly does bump off many of his rivals, most notably Edmund's last sort of full brother, Edwig,
Right.
is killed. But apparently he balks at infanticide.
Oh, good.
Now, it might seem a bit unlikely that Canute would be unduly squeamish at murdering, so it's probably more to do with PR. Because Canute very much makes an ostentatious point of not murdering the children. So instead he places them in the care of the Abbot of Westminster while there is a great council to meet and agree the succession, and apparently also to discuss the status of the boys and their provisions, so we don't have any details on what was decided.
I mean, so really this is a path that Richard III could look carefully at.
Indeed, yes. See how I do not kill these boys. What about all of... Don't look at those bodies.
Yeah. But these specifically, these 2.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Rue is totally taken to that whole mystery now.
Oh, the Princess in the Tower.
Yeah, he because we were playing the Top Trumps. Oh, this is Tuesday Talk stuff.
So instead, in 1017, it's Edric Striona who is murdered at Canute's orders.
Oh, brilliant.
Not the boys.
Brilliant. But he gave him the boys.
He did. And said, kill them.
And he said, no thanks, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, he's a traitorous so-and-so, and maybe Canute felt that he got his use out of him.
Yeah.
Now let's kill you before you do something to me. So the boys still live, but for how long? Reportedly, Canute's new wife, Emma of Normandy, the widow of Ethelred the Unready, had maybe a bit of an uneasy relationship with Edmund Ironside, and apparently she wants to prioritise her own children in the line of succession, so she now urges Canute to get a bit tougher.
Oh, God.
Sir, believe me, you must take other steps. These are the right heirs of the land. If they live, they will make war, while you can have peace if you take my advice. Cause it to be known that they are taken to another land. Beware of their doing harm. Trust them to such a man that they may be kept from evil.
She's saying that they're the rightful heirs.
Well, in terms of, bloodline and whatnot, they are the sons of Edmund Ironside, who is the royal line of Wessex. So people will always see them as rightful heirs. She's not saying they should be king instead of you. It's a bit like with Richard III, is saying, look, as long as these boys are alive, there's going to be a lot of people saying that they should be on the throne instead of you.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
And she says, give them to Poland.
Yeah, send them away. Yeah. Get rid of them, in that sense. Now, this might sound a bit like the traditional blame the woman legend.
Yeah.
But we assume Canute would have been sufficiently savvy and brutal to have made this decision for himself, or at least to have agreed with it and seen the logic.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want to be seen to be murdering the boys and mistreating them, so instead send them into exile. The question is where to send them. Now, accounts of Edward's life are frustratingly inconsistent. So we have reports of them going to Sweden or Hungary. Possibly it was actually both, but also neither.
So I wasn't far wrong with Poland.
You weren't far wrong with Poland.
Between the two.
Yeah, and Poland might have been a little bit in the mix of what some people have suggested, not for where they go, but a part of the story, because Canute's mother, Sigrid the Haughty, said to have been from Poland. So Poland is part of the Scandinavian world.
Nice.
So Gaimar and Orderic Vitalis report that they are entrusted to a Danish nobleman, Walgar, and he is charged with raising them in a manner fit for the children of Canute's brother, because Canute likes to position himself as if he is the brother of Edmund Ironside, a brother in arms. So that's part of why he wants to treat the boys fairly, or to be seen to treat them fairly, because he is portraying himself as the brother of Edmund Ironside. Sounds a bit romanticised, but perhaps by entrusting them to a figure in his own territory of Denmark, because Canute is king of Denmark as well as king of England, Canute can keep them away from prying English eyes, and if he does feel like they're becoming difficult and need to be dispatched, he can do so easily and without the English being witness to it. So it's a good place to put them away. Out of sight, out of mind. Now in 1028, Canute's focus shifts from England back to Scandinavia, and he plans a campaign to conquer Norway and ultimately part of Sweden. So taking advantage of his absence, apparently a plot is discovered in London to have the boys, now aged 12, restored to the throne. So according to Gaimar, Emma pipes up again and urges
I told you so.
Well, yes. So basically tells him you've got to bite the bullet now. So Canute gives orders to take the lads and maim them secretly so they could not be cured.
Blind them?
Exactly.
Really?
They love a good blinding.
Yeah.
Simon Keynes has dismissed this tale as elaborate, confused, and one suspects largely fanciful. But even if there isn't a grand restoration of the plot, and even if Emma isn't just sort of frothing at the mouth wanting to have these children killed, the fact of Canute going off campaigning in Norway does present an opportunity for anyone who wants to kick him off the throne to take advantage. And even if there wasn't actually an active plot that Canute's worried about, it does make sense that he might think, these boys, what am I going to do with them?
Yeah, what are you going to do with them?
And I'm going to Denmark where they are. Might be easier just to kill them now. I don't think anyone's so bothered about the Edmund Ironside thing anymore.
And they're less cute.
Less cute. However, thankfully, someone from Canute's entourage gives Earl Walgar a tip-off telling him that if he held them dear at all, he should send them away. So it's most likely now, in 1028, that he probably does take the boys to Sweden. Because some accounts have him going straight to Sweden.
Right.
But the one that we're going with is that they go to Denmark initially, but then in 1028 they go to Sweden, because this is what a lot of people are doing. They're sort of effectively fleeing from Canute. If they're not on Canute's side of this grand campaign, you're trying to get away from where he is.
So he's lost the boys then?
So he's lost the boys.
Who was this fellow who whipped them away?
Walgar.
And he's the guy that was entrusted to...
Hmm.
And he's formed a bond with them?
Mm.
You need to change that person every week, don't you?
Yeah, if I was going to ultimately kill some children, then... Now, it's often stated that they went to the court of Olaf Skotkonung, who's king of Sweden, Knut's kinsman, and an ally, which would have made sense if they went straight to Sweden and Knut wanted them killed. But if there's a bit of a delay going on, by 1028 Olaf Skotkonung is dead, and Knut is now campaigning against Sweden. So you can imagine now that Sweden might receive them more sympathetically than they would have done 10 years ago. And indeed, there are a number of people passing through Sweden but going further into exile to really get away from Knut. Now, at this point, that's what happens with the boys as well, but probably they go not to Hungary, as a number of sources suggest, but to Russia.
Really?
So obviously we're a long way from England now, and it feels a completely distant world when we're in the early 11th century, but Russia is close geographically and culturally to Scandinavia.
Yeah.
So Olaf Skotkonung's sister is actually married to the Grand Prince of Kiev, Yaroslav the Wise.
Ah.
And she's still there, so her court, his court, becomes a refuge for a large number of Scandinavian exiles at this time when Canute is going around conquering everyone.
Right.
Yaroslav is the sort of founding father of his nation, so sort of Kievan Rus, as it's known. So, and from that, Ukraine, Belarus and Russia all trace their origins.
Yeah.
He controls the seaborne trade between sort of Scandinavia and Byzantium, and his court, indeed, is a sort of hybrid culture of Byzantine, Nordic, and then sort of Eastern kind of military traditions and religions.
Very cool.
Yeah. He's still solidifying his power in 1028, and one of his strategies is to play host to Europe's exiled princes.
Yeah.
Because the hope is that if they all come to your court, A, it gives you a certain amount of lustre, but if they then go on to reclaim their thrones, and you are now an ally, well, suddenly...
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You're part of that. So the Leges Edwardi Confessoris recorded that Yaroslav received Edward well, along with other notable arrivals at a similar time that included Olaf II of Norway, who is overthrown by Canute in this conquest, Andrew of Hungary, and Harold Hardrada.
No way!
So Harold Hardrada and Edward the Exile, both at the court of Yaroslav.
Harold Hardrada is fleeing Canute.
So Harold Hardrada is a younger sort of half-brother of Olaf II of Norway, so he and Olaf are
right
on the run.
Okay.
From Canute. So it's the place to be, I guess, if you're an exile in Europe at this time.
Yeah, nice.
Off to Kiev. It must have had a profound impact on Edward, because he's just entering adolescence at this point, so it's a really formative period for him to be there. So he probably goes up more sort of Kievan Rus than he does English. That's really the dominant forming period of his life. Yaroslav is a cultured man in his prime. He produces new law codes, expands his territories as further military campaigns. And indeed, it's probably quite likely that Edward and his brother would have earned their spurs in one of Yaroslav's campaigns, because it's something that's expected of royal princes in their mid-teens to win their spurs at a young age.
So that's how he's earning his keep? He would help in wars?
Yeah.
Right.
So even though he's only sort of just entering adolescence, actually the point at which he's a teenager probably would have been expected to start getting involved in that sort of stuff.
Horrible.
Another way that Yaroslav utilises the royal princes at his court is to build up international alliances, in particular at the moment in opposition to Denmark and Canute and his great big empire. So one daughter marries the future Henry I of France, but otherwise he engages in what's sort of been termed marital speculation. So he gambles on the exiled princes. So Harold Hardrada, Andrew of Hungary both marry daughters of Yaroslav. So if they ever become king, he's the father-in-law of...
He's like fully trying to create like this alternative Europe.
Yeah.
He's the crux of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he's not going to campaign for them. He's not going to lead armies into their countries and help them. But he's giving them a refuge for now. And if ever they do become the monarch, he stands...
He sees an investment come back.
...benefit.
Yeah.
And seemingly, he also speculates on Edward, who marries his daughter Agatha.
Okay.
Now, I say seemingly because Agatha's family background has generated an awful lot of historical debate. And indeed, I've probably got more notes on who Agatha's father was than the entirety of the rest of Edward's life.
Really?
It's all about who is her father. And there are lots of different versions of this. So the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle simply states that she was the emperor's kinswoman. But which emperor and what kind of kin is not specified. After this, we have medieval chroniclers taking on something of a veritable merry-go-round across Europe. So perhaps a daughter of Emperor Henry II, but he's probably too old. Maybe Emperor Henry III, or perhaps his niece by a half-brother. Some suggest a Hungarian monarch like King Stephen, though he'd probably be too old, or King Solomon, who'd probably be too young.
Okay.
So the theory that I'm going with is that she was a daughter of Yaroslav. So Adam of Bremen, writing just 30 years after the events, Roger of Howden and the Leges Edwardi Confessoris all state that she was married in Rus, with the Leges specifying that she was of Rus royal blood, and Roger of Howden states that her father was a Rus king, all of which point to Yaroslav. Adam had close connections to the Rus court, and the Leges also seems to have had access to family traditions that other medieval chroniclers didn't have to draw upon.
Right.
So these kind of independent sources
If they're
that have all
agreeing,
got quite good connections to say this, and they all say Russia. So also that gives some links to the Hungarian and the imperial courts, which also helps to explain some of the accounts which suggest a kinsman of the emperor, or perhaps the daughter of the king of Hungary. They have these connections through Russia, which makes sense of those other names as well.
Right.
You can see why confused chroniclers, not really knowing who any of these people are, would have gone, it's probably the emperor's brother, let's say.
I love the idea of a monk on his lunch break chatting to another monk saying, how's it going? Oh, really struggling at the moment. No idea how to pitch this together.
I don't even know where it is, let alone who these people are.
The other fellow's just saying, just make it up. No one will know.
I'll never know. Also, onomastic analysis.
Hello.
So that's effectively family names in the family tree.
Right.
And where those names come from, show that whilst traditionally Greek names like Agatha are actually quite rare in Western Europe at this time, they are actually quite common in Kievan Rus dynasty.
Because of that Byzantine element.
Exactly. And that's something that we see with Edward and Agatha's daughters, Margaret and Christina. These are both traditionally Greek or sort of Latin names and not common in Western Europe at
So that's the first Margaret?
Well, it's not the first Margaret, but probably it's the reason that Margaret is a name, a traditional name in the UK, is because of his daughter Margaret. But Margaret and Christina, at this point, having those names, Agatha having that name, that all again points to Russia being quite likely.
Yeah. It's like coming back and calling your son Vlad.
Yes. Where have you been? Denmark.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this means, if true, that Edward is not just part of the Rus court, but thanks to the marriages of Yaroslav's other daughters, he's a brother-in-law to Henry I of France, and technically he's a brother-in-law to Harold Hardrada.
Yeah. So this is why he's important in 1066 then?
Well, yeah, and you see these, again, like you said, this different nexus, axis in Europe that he's got the connections to. He's also a brother-in-law to Andrew of Hungary. Now, Andrew's another exiled prince of a similar age to Edward, and they grew up together at Yaroslav's court and seems to have developed a close connection. Like Kievan Rus, Hungary at this time is a very new Christian kingdom, so it's founded by King Stephen I in 1000. But a succession crisis sees Andrew and his two brothers forced into exile, hence why they end up with Yaroslav.
Right.
However, in 1046 we have a nationalist uprising in Hungary, and that gives Andrew the opportunity to return to claim the throne. And it seems that Edward and his brother Edmund go with him.
Really?
Now, you might wonder, why do they go? Why do they go to Hungary?
They're mates.
Why do they leave Russia? Well, exactly. In one sense, yes. They're mates. There's a brotherhood there. I suppose literal brother-in-law from Edward's perspective. But as you said, they've grown up together.
And what else are they going to do with their time?
Well, yeah, exactly. And they may at this point feel like they've come to a bit of a dead end in Russia. Particularly because in England at this point, 1042, Edward the Confessor has come to the throne. So the Viking dynasty that Canute set in place has now ended, and we've gone back to the Saxons. So while Canute and the Vikings were there, Yaroslav would have been machinating and hoping perhaps to get Edward or Edmund on the throne, and thinking the Saxons would want them back. But now there is a Saxon on the throne, and at this point you would assume Edward would have children. At that point, the prospects of Edward ever being asked to come back are pretty remote.
Because everyone's happy with this new king that they know and is Saxon.
So at that point, maybe Yaroslav is like, okay, this one hasn't really worked out. They may feel like, oh, we're never getting to go back. That destiny perhaps they had in mind doesn't look very likely. 30 years old now as well. Just a slight little switch in mindset, and maybe they're thinking, well, what are we going to do with our lives? Chance for an adventure in Hungary with bestly mates Andrew.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, we don't have any details, unfortunately, of their involvement in Andrew's campaign, but it is likely that they would have had an important role in his army. The nationalists are actually pagans. So in spite of his committed Christianity, Andrew is sort of reliant on an army that's filled with like wizards and warlocks and all sorts of bizarre characters.
He's probably thinking he can convert them after.
Well, exactly. He's using them to get onto the throne, and then once he is king, he just sends them all away and is like, no, it's definitely Christian.
Yeah.
But as such, given that he's having to deal with all these sorts of people that he presumably doesn't really like or trust very much, having people that he's known for basically his whole life, who definitely are proper Christians, like Edward and Edmund, that he might have fought alongside in Russian campaigns, you imagine that they would be quite close and trusted lieutenants.
Yeah,
that he would have valued. Still, it's a very different environment, obviously, for Edward to have to get used to as well. But nevertheless, he likely enjoys a privileged position, with Andrew having secured the throne, and is now King Andrew of Hungary, granting large estates to his most trusted barons. And interestingly, there's a 1235 land deed which references the Terra Britannorum de Nadsad, which means the lands of the Briton at Nadast.
So this chap Edward now has lands in Hungary.
So yes, extensive estates, and potentially a castle, Reka Castle, in Hungary. So it seems like he and his family live in this grand estate, and that presumably thus he is quite a senior person at Andrew's court.
Yeah, and Hungarian by now, right? If he's or of Eastern European.
Yeah, culturally Hungary will be a change again from Kiev, and he probably is a bit weird being in Hungary, because that probably feels a bit odd.
Yeah.
And obviously the first 10 years he's in Denmark, then he's in Kiev, then he's in Hungary, so he's always sort of having to adapt to quite different environments.
But I mean, I think of all of the places, England is the least like home.
Now, sadly, it's around this time that his brother Edmund dies, on the 10th of January. I don't know what year, but it was the 10th of January. Probably about 1047, so like the first 10th of January after the Hungarian uprising.
Oh, right.
When they return, you imagine that's probably a decent time. Must have been a devastating loss for Edward after 30 years in exile together.
Yeah.
Just 30 years of life together. They've been that's his one constant throughout all of this upheaval.
Yeah.
Is his brother. But at the same time, it seems that he is now finally settled. He has a wife, 3 children, large estates, close relationship with the king. Life's pretty good.
I'll stay.
But unexpectedly, destiny will come calling.
Oh, he's going to muck it up, isn't he?
Now, back in England, as we said, Edward the Confessor coming back to the throne, restoring the royal Saxon line, everything seems fine, but unfortunately the marriage doesn't produce any children. And by 1051 it's pretty clear that it is not going to produce any children. He's not going to remarry. There will be no royal heirs. Now, we're going to be speaking to the historian Tom Licence a little bit later on about what exactly Edward the Confessor did intend for the succession. And who he was thinking of and who he was planning. So we're going to go into that in a bit more depth. But obviously the focus traditionally lands on the 2 men who would battle for the throne in 1066, Harold Godwinson, William Duke of Normandy.
And Harold?
Well, but in terms of the people that were likely claimants, Harold Hardrada's a bit left field.
Yeah.
Surprises everybody.
Yeah. He's the Lib Dem.
I mean, on the one hand, probably the least Lib Dem of them.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not sure that any of them are particularly...
Just takes troops and votes from the other 2.
So Harold Godwinson is the country's most powerful nobleman, while William Duke of Normandy reportedly was promised the throne by the Confessor when he was at odds with the Godwins in 1051. But neither man has a blood claim to the English throne.
Uh-oh. I know someone who does.
Well, yes. Now, barring the Danish usurpation of 1016 to 42, Wessex has only been ruled by royal princes since its origins in the 6th century. And since the 9th century, which is obviously when we started this series, it's only been ruled by men who were ethelings, i.e. a son of a previous king.
Yeah.
And there is only one man alive who fits that description.
How do they even know where he is? You say, oh, do you remember that? There was that guy 30 years ago called Edward. You got his number? Like, how do they get hold of him?
Well, yes, it's one of those things where you think it's sometimes presented as if they rediscover him, as if he just appears somehow on a circular. I was like, oh, sir, look who's in the press. Look who's done the marathon in Hungary.
Yeah, exactly. No, look beyond the person. Who's that in the crowd? Yeah.
Probably, they have contacts with other nations, although they don't have probably close contact with Hungary. They obviously initially have contact with Scandinavia. Scandinavia has contact with Russia. The Holy Roman Emperor has got close contact with Hungary. So not directly. They won't have been directly connected to Edward the Exile, but they probably are aware that he should be out there and roughly an idea of where he should be.
And that he's got some power. He's got a life over there.
Yeah. They might not know much about him, and they probably don't have his postal address, but they probably do have a sense that he is alive and he's out there.
Right.
So he's the only man who fits the description, and he is the son of a king, and indeed a celebrated king, Edmund Ironside. His memory is very much celebrated as a heroic resistor to the Vikings, someone that still evokes feelings in the English nation, so someone thus that his son might.
Yeah, but he'll come back dressed differently and eating goulash.
Well, at the moment they have no idea about this. Now, Edward the Confessor does have other nephews on the English side of things, but they're through the female line, so sisters rather than brothers, and also thus they have sort of like nominal French parentage, which isn't hugely popular as well. But Edward, male line, which is how it's always been, and he's not associated with France, and Hungary or Kiev don't really have any particular associations for England, i.e. they don't have any negative associations. It's no kind of threat. There's no sense that, oh, well, all the Hungarians will come swarming over. It's so far away that you think, well, he'll come over, but he's not bring them all with him. So it's kind of a safer choice than maybe a French nephew.
Right.
That you think, well, then the French will just won't come in.
Yeah.
Edward's a bit more neutral in that sense. Plus, one of the key things we mentioned in this series, he's an adult. He's about 38 years old in 1054 when it seems that Edward the Confessor starts to really pursue this. And he's already got a son and heir.
Yeah, that's looking good, isn't it?
So you've got a succession problem, and actually there's a fully grown adult with a son in the European court. He's a ready-made solution to all the problems.
It's like Michael Gove always used to talk about his Brexit deal. It's oven ready. It's an oven ready deal.
Now, your point, though, is relevant. The question is actually, how are they going to get hold of him?
Yeah.
As I said, it's not probably that he was just suddenly discovered, but nevertheless, how they actually track him down specifically enough to talk to him is very different to just knowing that he is alive.
This is such a well-worn movie trope, though, isn't it? Turning up to the ranch saying, do you know where Edward the Elder is? Edward the Exile, rather. And Edward turns around and says, no, not interested. We need you back.
So they know he's alive and they know he's in Hungary, but beyond that, they probably don't have a lot to go on. And indeed, it's doubtful that really anybody in the English court even really knows entirely where Hungary is. Never mind somewhere within Hungary.
How do you get to Hungary?
Well, exactly.
How do you know when you're in Hungary?
Yeah.
You just get across the channel and there's someone there who's guiding around that way Spain, that way everywhere else.
Well, that's the problem. Basically, whoever they send, they're going to be sending pretty much blind into Eastern Europe, a country they don't know the lie of the land or really the political or geographical or any sort of context.
Exactly.
It's a very risky and dangerous assignment to send anybody on.
With asking for directions as well. You get to a fork in the road and there's a local. You know you're going to Hungary, but that chap won't know where Hungary is. He'll just know which of the next road. So you have to sort of have this weird macro-micro level of where you're going.
Exactly. It's a very difficult mission. It's potentially a very dangerous mission. International travel, high-stakes diplomacy. Who are you going to call? A bishop. So they send Eldred, the Bishop of Worcester.
Right.
Who, to be fair, does have a bit of experience because he had previously been to Rome on the king's errand, which is a much more well-trodden path that is easier to find, but nevertheless he has at least travelled.
You want to get that bishop on it, he's been across the sea.
Yeah. And he's a key advisor at court as well, so, he's got that sort of level of seniority. So in 1054, he sets off on a mission to bring Edward the Exile back to England. But he doesn't go to Hungary.
Because he doesn't know where it is.
Probably, yes, because he doesn't know where it is. Distance, the uncertainty about the journey, etc. So instead he goes to Cologne and Emperor Henry III.
Right.
Now, Henry was Canute's brother-in-law, so he'd been married to Canute's sister, Gunhild.
Right.
Now, Gunhild isn't alive anymore, but it means England has had close contact with Henry III. There's a good relationship between the two countries. So he's got close connections with Hungary. He knows Hungary well. England know him. Perfect intermediary.
Right,
Let's
fine.
go ask the emperor what to do. Unfortunately, what Eldred doesn't appear to appreciate is that relations between Hungary and Henry at this point are at an all-time low. So the nationalist uprising in which Andrew had taken the throne was actually against Henry's client king.
Right.
And what's more, in recent years, Andrew's been taking an increasingly independent course of action, even now supporting a rebellion against Henry from the Duke of Bavaria.
Uh-oh.
As such, Henry, whilst perfectly friendly to Eldred whilst he's there, delays and stalls and does absolutely nothing whatsoever to in any way further Eldred's mission. Now, it seems a bit harsh. I mean, he doesn't like Andrew in Hungary. It seems a little bit harsh given how important this is to England. So the only logical explanation is that he's all too well aware that Edward the Exile must have had a prominent role fighting for Andrew in the revolution, effectively against him. So consequently, he potentially has no desire to see Edward the Exile become King of England.
His enemy.
Exactly. So, Eldred, perhaps not being quite the super sharp international man of mystery that maybe he was made out to be, doesn't seem to have realised that he was being played. So he spends a very happy year in Cologne being feted, receiving gifts, and even accepts an invitation to go and spend a year studying the ecclesiastical organisation of the German church.
He's somewhat losing sight of his mission here, isn't he?
Yes, before eventually returning in 1055, having made absolutely no progress whatsoever.
Couldn't find him, but I did write this book.
Yeah. I know so much more now about the German church.
You'd be furious with him.
However, in 1056, Henry III dies, and perhaps that obstacle now being removed, England have another go at contacting Edward the Exile.
Yeah.
This time, the rather savvier Harold Godwinson is sent on a mission to the continent, and one suspects one of his tasks might have been to sort out the particulars and get contact with Edward the Exile. What we don't know, of course, what does Edward the Exile himself think of all of this? Like you said, maybe he's out, maybe he's done, maybe he's happy.
Yeah.
Maybe the delay might have been him as much as Henry III. He was only a baby when his father Edmund Ironside died, an infant when he sent into exile, his potential subjects having accepted a Viking invader, taking his throne, and he's not been back to England since.
Yeah.
He's settled in Hungary, brother-in-law to the king, brother-in-arms to the king. He's got a young family, prominent position at court. He may have by now have reconciled himself not to returning to England. So, is it worth giving everything up for a country that turned its back on him 40 years ago?
And what's the answer?
Also, of course, it's not necessarily a guarantee that he's going to be king, because it's unlikely perhaps that they would have absolutely promised it without seeing him.
Yeah.
So probably we've got slightly conditional offers, semi-promises made second-hand across thousands of miles by intermediaries.
Which could be lethal.
So, you can understand if he might have been reluctant.
Yeah.
And yet, would Yaroslav have married his daughter to an exiled prince who doesn't have any ambition to recover his throne?
Good point.
Would a man who's given up on the English throne, having given his two daughters Greek names, called his son Edgar?
Oh.
That's a pointedly royal Saxon name that he's given his son.
Yeah.
So perhaps, with a life shaped by this sense of home and royal destiny that one day will come, the elusive crown now being freely offered without the need of an army or an invasion is too good an offer to refuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in 1057, after 40 years in exile, Edward returns to England, the last Etheling.
Edgar returns to...
Sorry, Edward. Well, and probably Edgar with him.
Yeah.
But yes, Edward, the last Etheling, returns to England. Probably dressed in rather strange Hungarian fashions. Might not even have been able to speak English.
Wow.
Likewise, his sort of little entourage he would have had with him. You can only imagine what his new subjects or potential new subjects thought of him and what he thought of them.
Yeah, God. He would be so alien to them.
Yes.
And they to him. Wow.
Sadly, we'll never know what they made of each other. This is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for 1057. This year came Edward Etheling, son of King Edmund, to this land, and soon after died. His body is buried within St. Paul's Minster at London. We know not for what reason it was done that he should not see his relation King Edward. So after all that time, 40 years in exile, pretty much as soon as he steps foot back on England, he dies on the 19th of April 1057.
God, it's like an elephant going to a graveyard to die. Oh dear.
Now, of course, as we've said before, people do die. Alfred's line are a short-lived bunch. I had a little look. The average age of death for the previous monarchs is 34. So, 41's not actually that unusual as an age. But did he really just happen to drop dead the moment he'd set foot in England?
Who would have killed him? Harold Godwinson.
Now, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle doesn't suggest murder, but it does hint at some sort of conspiracy, because he's obviously he wasn't able to see the king, and it's suggested that it's unusual that he wasn't able to. So he obviously doesn't just step off the ship and just plonk down dead straight away. So he's obviously there for enough time that he could have gone to see the king, and it doesn't happen.
Maybe just caught a strain of virus that he didn't have access to over in Hungary. Dropped him down dead.
Maybe, but then it wouldn't be strange, would it, if he was really ill and sickening?
Yeah.
So there's no evidence that he was unwell prior to his arrival. So, yes, exactly. Could he have been killed? Who would have killed him? Yes, obviously, the leading candidate there is Harold Godwinson. If he does harbour ambitions for the throne, that would have been completely gone with Edward the Exile.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way that Harold Godwinson could have contemplated trying to claim the throne after Edward the Confessor if you had a 40-year-old royal prince there.
Well, I can't believe he went out to
on
that trip. Or maybe he couldn't believe his luck.
Well, yes.
And he poisoned him on the way.
So you can actually see the ambition. Now, obviously, on one hand, it's still, we're still nearly 10 years off 1066. Harold's not quite the figure that he will be at that point. So maybe it's a bit far off to see him doing that. But, that's a potential explanation. And yet, there's no contemporary suggestion of foul play. And what's more, if Harold or anyone else wanted to eliminate royal rivals, why didn't Harold either just stop him coming in the first place or kill him over in Europe before he crossed the Channel? And if he was murdering him to keep him out of the line of succession, why does nobody kill Edward's little boy, Edgar, who then is brought up at court?
Yeah, the Etheling.
Okay, the Etheling. So, who knows? But Edward has come agonisingly close to fulfilling his destiny, and he is given a royal funeral. So notable the fact that it's at St. Paul's, because that's alongside Edward the Confessor's father, Ethelred the Unready, rather than at Glastonbury, where Edmund Ironside is buried.
Is he really? I went to Glastonbury Abbey the other day. Didn't see any of that.
So that suggests probably a state funeral, and that Edward the Confessor has chosen to bury him somewhere that is part of his royal part of the family, his dynasty. So it's a way of symbolising that Edward the Exile had been brought back properly into the royal family. And maybe it's also a symbol of the hope that it might still continue with his son, Edgar the Etheling.
Yeah. Why not Westminster? Was that not built at this point?
Well, that is what he's literally building it. At the moment,
okay,
Confessor, so, yeah. Anyway, that's the life and non-reign of Edward the Exile. We'll now move on to review him after a quick break. So just a quick message to say that Rex Factor are going to be doing a live show at the Ludlow Assembly Rooms on Friday the 21st of August at 7 o'clock PM. We're going to be looking at the four main contenders for the throne in 1066, Harold Godwinson, William the Conqueror, Harold Hardrada and Edgar the Etheling, and we're going to ask the audience who comes to the show to decide who should have become the king. We've had lots of fun. We've been to Ludlow in previous years and we've really loved getting the chance to meet Rex Factor fans in person. So if you are able to, then please do come along to join us on Friday, 21st of August at the Ludlow Assembly Rooms. You can get tickets directly from the Ludlow Assembly Rooms website, or we will have a link to it on our website, rexfactorpodcast.com. Hopefully, we'll get to see you there.
Battleyness!
A lot of Edward's story has to be sort of put together by supposition. So we don't technically have any direct evidence of any military action at all. We can't say he was in this battle, he was in this campaign, etc.
Definitely was, though.
Well, exactly, but there's very good reason to suppose that he would have had extensive military experience. As we said, it's expected that young princes in Rus would earn their spurs, and Yaroslav has plenty of military campaigns where Edward might have got stuck in. Perhaps most likely to start off with a campaign against the nomadic Pechenegs in 1036, where Yaroslav inflicted a heavy defeat on the tribes when they attempted to capture Kiev.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, Ed would have been 20 years old.
Yeah, right in the thick of it.
And Yaroslav certainly looked to the foreigners at his court to help him in military matters. So particularly, obviously, all these Scandinavian warriors coming across, but we know from Harold Hardrada's story as well that he's given sort of military positions and stuff like that. So absolutely, Yaroslav would have expected them to...
Yeah, because they had, like, Byzantine... Because some... what are they called? Like, Vikings.
Varangians.
Yeah, went down to Byzantium.
Exactly. And a lot of them initially do come from
that court.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it seems more unlikely that Edward wouldn't have been involved in military affairs than that he would. So we can see that there's stuff going on in Rus right at the point at which Edward would have been earning his spurs and doing stuff. So absolutely. I think
and he's rewarded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's in Russia, most likely winning his spurs. And then we have the military adventure in Hungary, where he helps his brother-in-law Andrew take the throne. So essentially, Andrew was piggybacking onto a pagan nationalist uprising. So as we said, it's quite peculiar company. We've got warlocks, magicians, seers, all sorts of weird stuff going on. But as we said, that gives you reason to believe that Andrew would thus have put a particular weight of reliance on Edward and brother Edmund and people like that had come with him, because he knows that he can trust them. He knows that they're proper Christians and they've fought alongside each other. He knows they've got his back, whereas these other nationalists, he knows that there's a...
Well, he knows he's going to betray their cause.
And exactly, well, I know I'm going to betray them, so certainly I should assume that they might try and betray me as well.
Yeah.
But it's a successful uprising. Andrew does take the throne. So we assume that Edward is involved in that. In the 1050s, as we mentioned, Andrew also comes into conflict with Emperor Henry III. Henry launches a mini invasion, which Andrew is able to see off. So again, there's potential there for Edward to have gotten involved and fighting off. And as we saw, we know that Henry III seems to have done all he can to resist England getting into contact with Edward the Exile, which one must assume is because it's personal, because he sees Edward as somebody that has fought against him.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Unfortunately, of course, it is all supposition. We don't have any accounts that says he took part in this battle or in this campaign or whatever. Weirdly, the only comment we actually get directly addressing it is William of Malmesbury in the 12th century, who said of him, he was neither valiant nor of great ability.
Oh.
But for no apparent reason. We can't see any reason why he would have suggested that, so it feels quite sort of harsh and unwarranted.
Feels like he's just heard an opinion and repeated it.
Yeah. So we don't have any particular reason to say that of him at all. And, as I said, it feels to me like it's much more likely that he was involved in these military campaigns.
Yeah.
But we just don't have any detail or
He
evidence
definitely
of it.
Was. And successfully in every one, it seems.
Well, yes, actually, that's true as well. Yes, I hadn't really thought about it. Yes, they are successful military campaigns as well as being military campaigns.
I'm going to go 5 because we don't know.
Yeah, I think 5 feels fair as well. It absolutely feels like, again, if you were in the Weetan and thinking about whether this guy's good enough or not, you think, yeah, look, he's got some stuff here. This is a guy, he could probably lead a battle. He could probably has some kind of idea of what he's doing.
Yeah, he can wang a sword about, and there's enough of us here as well that we can pull this. They just needed a king that ticked that box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 5 from you, 5 from me. That's a 10 for Battleyness.
Scandal.
We do have a rather juicy scandal from Hungary provided by Geoffrey of Weimar. The seduction of a royal princess, an unplanned pregnancy.
Oi, oi.
Unfortunately, it relates to his brother Edmund rather than Edward.
Oh, darn it.
Also, the details are so sketchy, it's hard to find anything credible in it at all. So Gaimar actually calls him Edgar rather than Edmund.
I sympathise.
The princess that he identifies would only have been, might not even have been 8 years old. It definitely wasn't pregnant. And also he goes on to claim that King Andrew adopts him as his heir, which is demonstrably nonsense.
Who's this guy? William of Malmesbury?
Geoffrey of Gaimar for this one.
Okay.
So, I mean, if we're being generous, maybe Gaimar caught wind of some kind of scandal relating to Edmund in Hungary. And like you said, he isn't able to piece it together. He can't really understand who he's had an affair with and what's happened or why. So like you said, he's saying to his friend, what do I do? And they said, just make it up. Just throw some names in and make it up. No one's heard of them anyway.
There's a book about early Russian history somewhere, and it said something about an affair. Just stick that in.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
So there might be a kernel of truth that Edmund was a bit of a wild one and had an affair with someone prominent, and it was a bit of a scandal. But any of the other details are nonsense. And of course, the crucial one is that it's Edmund, not Edward. Edward is married with children. Oh, well, I mean, it doesn't preclude him from doing it, but he doesn't seem to have inspired any scandal at all. His pan-European adventures make it hard to imagine that he was a complete dullard.
Yeah.
But equally, I haven't got a single thing I could reference as being scandalous for him.
It's nothing, is it? Zero.
Zero for scandal.
Subjectivity.
It's always a challenge to consider subjectivity, as we've been seeing so far in the series, when the person in question, A, never got to be monarch, and B, doesn't really have much of a detailed biography that allows us to judge what they might have done. Never mind, millennium-old accounts of their fundraising efforts at the local Hungarian village fete. We do have a little bit to go on. So it's been observed that the St. Stephen crown of Hungary is quite similar in appearance to the St. Edward's crown, and also that an Anglo-Saxon ordo, so sort of order of ceremony, was used for the coronation of King Solomon, Andrew's son, in 1059.
Who's Andrew? Oh, that fella.
His brother-in-law. So it's hard to imagine who else could have provided that English influence in the Hungarian court apart from Edward.
Yeah.
Now, also, the fact that Edward leaves when he's about a year old, you wonder how he would have had an awful lot of knowledge or whatever of it.
Yeah.
But it might have been fed into him. You never know. But someone must have.
Amazing that crown coincidence. Is it coincidence, or do you reckon designed?
Yeah. In a funny way, we also have a sense of his popularity, if not for who he was, and at least for what he was. So after relating his arrival and death in England, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle lamented, "Alas, that was a rueful time, and injurious to all this nation, that he ended his life so soon after he came to England, to the misfortune of this miserable people." So, after years of uncertainty over the succession, Edward appears really, he's like the returning saviour.
Yeah.
He solves all their problems. Anything other than an heir of the royal blood is going to be contentious domestically and internationally.
He's perfect.
It's effectively inviting anyone with an army to try their hand at England if they can't find somebody, and he's absolutely the perfect person. He solves all those problems.
Yeah.
So they don't actually know Edward, but they needed Edward, and he did heed the call.
Yeah. You don't have to have the person, it's just someone to fill that office that ticks those boxes.
And he came. They called and he came. He travelled, thousands of miles to, for him, a completely different world of uncertain loyalty to him and all that business. But nevertheless, he did come.
Oh, so close.
On the other hand, of course, we don't have very much concrete to go on. As we said, some of the English envoys who did meet Edward might have thought, crikey, what on earth have we done? He's really weird.
Yeah. He collects all his old stool samples. I mean, we can't have this person as king.
Doesn't even speak English. So it's a weird one, subjectivity, where he's sort of, on the one hand, we don't really have an awful lot that he's done, and yet maybe that's a bit more for the Rex Factor, that counterfactual of what he represented, what he might have been, what he might have done.
There's nothing there.
But he was wanted, and he came. That's a service to the country, isn't it? He came thousands of miles. He had a happy little life in Hungary. Happy little life. He had a happy big life, didn't he? And you were saying, no, stop there, just...
Yeah. And he still went, but... So, there's nothing actually there, is there?
We don't know that he didn't be like, finally I will be able to get my revenge in blood.
Yeah, exactly. Now I have
On
a
this
deep
wretched nation.
Yeah. But always said I was going to slaughter every child. Everyone knows that. 0 for me.
I'm gonna perhaps a little romantically give him some points.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, just as I say, but because he heeds the call, because he makes a nice little English crown in Hungary or whatever he does. I'm going to give him a little bit, so I'm going to give him a 3 for subjectivity. Really? Yeah, it doesn't. That's still a low score, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's still a low score. I feel heeding the call in this nation's moment. They needed him. He came.
Yeah, that's 3 total, isn't it? So yeah.
Longevity.
Now, Edward's longevity is another one of those debatable affairs. So, if we're being ultra generous, we could say that he and his brother were the rightful heirs of Edmund Ironside in 1016, and thus would be the heir from 1016 until his death when he returns in 1057.
Yeah, well, that's why he's exiled.
Now, against that, I don't really know why, but nevertheless, there does tend to be an acceptance that the older brother is actually Edmund rather than Edward.
Oh, right.
Which would mean that he wouldn't technically be the heir until after Edmund had died.
Oh, well, that's right then. Yeah.
Also, you could say, well, he's not really the heir because you've also got Edward the Confessor who's hanging around. You've got other Saxon princes, and indeed Edward the Confessor becomes king in 1042. So, is Edward the Exile really heir from 1016 to 42 when actually the one that eventually comes back is Edward the Confessor?
Yeah, I see what you mean. So, like, he's not
really next in line. So you could argue that he's not really the heir at all until 1054, when the motion is then to bring him back. Or technically, maybe he's never actually named as heir. Maybe he's not officially ever the heir.
I think that's the case, because I was going to go with after his brother, but actually until... Well, no, maybe.
Well, my sort of compromise inclination is to say that it doesn't seem like we really know that the brother's definitely older. And if we were to say that from Edward the Confessor onwards, even if they didn't necessarily realise it, Edward the Exile is effectively the heir. Obviously, Edward the Confessor is planning to have children, but he doesn't. And when he realises that he's not going to have any children, it's like, right, let's find this other guy.
Yeah.
And they go to quite a lot of effort to find him and to bring him back. It's pretty implausible that they would bring him back for any reason other than for him to be heir.
Yeah, all right.
So I think if we say from Edward the Confessor's accession onwards, 1042, he is effectively, even though nobody really knows it, the heir. So that would mean that he is the heir from the 8th of June 1042 to the 19th of April 1057.
Oh, right, well done.
So that's a nearly reign of 14.83 years, which gives him a score of 9.5 out of 20, which is the 15th best for the series.
Well done, that man.
Dynasty, not the programme.
Edward has 3 surviving children.
Edgar
the Etheling, who we shall discuss in a future episode, of course.
And, don't tell me, Margaret and
the other one.
It was something like something really modern, like Beverly or something, isn't it? What is it?
Christina.
Oh, Christina. Yeah, maybe.
So Christina becomes the Abbess of Romsey Abbey. Margaret becomes known as Margaret of Scotland, Saint Margaret of Scotland, Queen of Scots.
That's her.
That's her. It's his daughter. And Edgar the Etheling, who we'll discuss in a future episode, is another nearly monarch. And of course, through Margaret's daughter, Edith, but she becomes Matilda, Edward the Exile's royal line will return to the English throne because she marries Henry I, and then they have children and that line continues. So Edward the Exile is the great-grandfather of the Empress Matilda.
Wow.
Another nearly monarch.
Yeah.
And then finally, the great-great-grandfather of Henry II.
Yeah.
So Edward the Exile, as much as he doesn't become king, nevertheless, he comes back, and as a result, that royal line does return.
So it sort of worked.
Yeah.
Him coming back.
Ultimately, that dynasty does continue because Edward came back. So all that he went through, all of that, as much as he didn't become king, actually the dynasty does.
Interesting.
And of course, all the Scottish monarchs.
Yeah.
That, we have several kings that are the son of Margaret, and then that whole line is all from Margaret as well. So actually, England, Scotland and the UK, they do all have
Golly.
that dynastic legacy from Edward the Exile.
So what does he get?
Well, he only gets... actually, no, it's pretty good. He gets 11.5 for Dynasty, which is the joint 5th best for the series.
Yeah,
actually. It's a pretty
yeah.
good Dynasty score. So that gives him a total score of 34, which is the second best that we've had thus far. But it's not all about the score. Does he have that certain something, that lasting legacy, the great achievement, the star quality that we call...
Rex Factor!
I think so.
You can so easily see how this is an epic film or
Yeah.
series, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
Son of the heroic Edmund Ironside escapes the murderous clutches of Edric Striona and Canute. Exile takes in Denmark, Sweden, Russia, Hungary.
And all that allows visually. All the,
exactly.
that court.
Hungary, you've got a nationalist uprising with wizards and warlocks running around. The heroic but tragic returning denouement. And then, of course, the
His line.
epilogue of
Yeah.
the line continuing. And, and it's the counterfactual for Edward the Exile is an incredible one. Because, say, he's someone that gets forgotten about. It's funny because he's born in the midst of the Danish conquest. And his death is the thing that makes possible the Norman Conquest.
Gosh, yeah.
But that's the thing, like, without Edward the Exile's death, 1066 does not happen. Harold Godwinson does not become king. William the Conqueror would not have invaded England. There was no way they would have had any hope of challenging Edward the Exile if he'd still been alive in the air. So the whole course of English history changes because of the death of Edward the Exile.
That is a big one. That is Rexy, isn't it?
It's very, very Rexy. And I just think his life, even though we miss the pertinent details of it, obviously,
Yeah.
but what we do know, that life of exile all around Europe, all these places that never usually come anywhere near this story.
Yeah.
And then he comes back.
It's very Rexy. Yes, from me. Definitely.
I think it's a yes from me as well. So that means Edward the Exile, the forgotten man, has got the Rex Factor.
Hey!
Well done, Edward the Exile. And that is the first Rex Factor of the Nearly Monarchs.
Oh, good. Good. So, but weirdly, he's not a nearly monarch then. Not a nearly Rex
So he's not a
Factor.
nearly.
Correspondence Corner.
So that was Edward the Exile. So let us know if you agree, if you would be giving him the Rex Factor. Head to our website, rexfactorpodcast.com, to get more information about the show and links to all of our social media accounts. And if you would like to hear more from us, then you can join the Privy Council at patreon.com/Rex Factor, where you get an ad-free version of this podcast and over 450 bonus episodes, including a Privy Chamber episode on Edward the Exile, where we'll go into some more detail about him, where he did or didn't go into exile, and all the people that Agatha might have been descended from.
What a fun thing to buy. Membership to this.
And you can gift it as well, I
Yeah.
believe, so,
You know, stuff, you get rid of stuff eventually. You can't get rid of knowledge. Although I am living proof that you can get rid of knowledge.
within the hour.
Yeah, I know. But these trainers won't wear out, basically.
And we have some new Privy Councillors to welcome to the fold.
Diana Bowler, Alison Schwartz, Elizabeth Hartley, Velveteen, Kat Nutt, Eva Johansson, Charlemagne,
That was impressive, wasn't it?
Amanda Herbert, Hannah Parker, Sparks, Luca Skooken, Lockhart Jamieson, Tom Dewar, Marilyn R, Pukila, Krista Kitty, Noah August, David Gregson, Rebecca Palmer, Sam Waller, and Tim Seeley.
Thank you.
So that is all from us today. That's the end of Edward the Exile. Now, we are going to be doing Edgar the Etheling, but he's not going to be the next episode. We're going to finish the sort of Saxon mini-series with Edgar. So that means that the next one we're going to do before Edgar will be brother-in-law of Edward the Exile, Harold Hardrada.
Brilliant.
One of the most remarkable figures of the age. See you next time.
Cheerio.